Hello there. I am excited to read you another edition of the Hope Chest today. So there is a mural. This is a mural of the first woman able to vote under women's suffragist law. And that woman is Seraph T. Young, and she is in Utah. Yeah, this is in Utah, folks. And this is actually the year, I believe it was 1870. Yeah, 1870. So, in either 69 or 1870, the Utah Territory, it wasn't a state yet, but the Territory of Utah actually passed a law that allowed women to vote in state elections. So, um, so she was the first one to actually vote under a women's suffragist law, which is pretty cool. I mean, that's a pretty cool thing for Utah to have. And this was a full 50 years before, um, before what we're talking about right now with the Hope Chest, before the national women's suffrage movement. So the history after this gets a little bit sticky. I do know that about 10 years after this, that the federal government, so the national government, took away that right again from Utah. And then I know that Utah was able to get that back in 1896. But I don't think I think they were only allowed to do state voting for the state. So like governor and senators and stuff. I don't think they were able to vote in the national for the presidential, which is what this is for all elections. So it's pretty cool that Utah was actually a very early leader in helping women attain the right to vote. So there's your cool fun fact for today. So let's get back to 1920. All right. So remember, Chloe got back yesterday, and let's go from there. Let me find where I am at. They're voting on a motion to table, an anti-near Violet snapped. What does that mean, table? Miss Dexter frowned. To table the question. It means to not vote on ratification at all. To put it aside. It's what North Carolina did, you blithering idiot, she added. Several people around Miss Dexter gasped, and the anti turned around and looked ready to slap Miss Dexter. You take that back. Oh, shut up and go back to your kitchen, Miss Dexter snarled, or wherever you think the women's sphere is. Violet seized Miss Dexter by the arm and, with Chloe's help, led her away before a fight could start. Fight, 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 fight. The crowd squeezed aside to let them through. They found a space near the back. Violet and Chloe each kept a tight hold on one of Miss Dexter's arms. I'd like to rearrange her face for her, Miss Dexter said. That idiotic traitor. Do it later, Violet suggested. Look, we can see better from up here anyway. A cheer went up in the gallery. Defeated, someone cried. What happened? Miss Dexter demanded. A man near them turned around beaming. Looks like Mr. Turner's changed sides. He voted against the motion to table it and it tied. Tied? Said Violet, confused. 48 to 48, the man said. That kills a motion to table. Turner wasn't anti, but he just voted against tabling with the Suffs. He changed sides. Either that, or he made a mistake. He didn't make a mistake, Violet thought. He got a phone call. Remember, that was the guy that either yesterday or the day before that Violet had to go talk with, that went to the governor to get on the phone with the presidential candidate. He didn't make a mistake, Violet thought. He got a phone call. It's finished, Miss Dexter said. Turner changing sides isn't enough. We have 48, they have 48. She stuffed her fingers into her mouth and began biting them. I don't believe it, said the man in front of them. That Seth Walker is making them vote to table again. Can he even do that? And now he's down there with his arm around Turner, talking in his ear. Violet stood on tiptoes and was just in time to see Turner shrug Seth Walker away from him, get to his feet, and vote against the motion to table again. Now he's calling the question, someone said. He's calling the question. Everyone was murmuring and whispering it to each other. This is it. Seth Walker's calling the question. Violet desperately wanted to ask Chloe what had happened to Myrtle and Mr. Martin, but now wasn't the time. She and Chloe were on opposite sides of Miss Dexter, and a hush fell over the chamber, and galleries that seemed to forbid even a whisper. Violet was still clutching Miss Dexter's arm, and Miss Dexter clutched hers now too. Violet didn't even especially like Miss Dexter. She couldn't forget about that business with Myrtle on the train, but right now they were clinging to each other as if their lives depended on it. This was the vote that mattered. So right now, this is where they're going to start doing that roll call vote I talked about yesterday, where they go through the senators one by one and ask them how they vote. This was the vote that mattered. Anderson, aye! He was ours from the start, Miss Dexter murmured, and he never wavered, bless him. Bell, aye! Remember, this is A-Y-E, which means yes. Bell, aye! Bond, they bought him, Miss Dexter said through fingers in her mouth. Bought him like a pig in a poke, Violet suggested. She was far too nervous to care whether it sounded right or whether it was even true. 48 to 48, Miss Dexter said again. We have 48 and they... Shh! The man in front of them hissed. Burn! Aye! Canali. What? Said Miss Dexter. She dropped Violet's arm in surprise. A murmur was sweeping through the gallery. Byrne? Harry T. Byrne voted for ratification? But Byrne is theirs. Burns is an anti. He's ours now, the man in front of them barked. Burns is ours. Byrne changed his mind. If we can just keep Turner... Violet nodded silently. Her voice wouldn't work. The clerk called off the men's names, and they voted aye, nay. And there were no more surprises. But would Turner vote aye? Please, let us keep Turner, Miss Dexter breathed. Turner, the clerk called. Silence fell for a moment that seemed to last much longer than it did. For some reason, Violet could hear Mrs. Catt's voice in her head saying, 72 years! Do you hear me? 72 years! Aye! Yes! Miss Dexter leapt into the air. Violet didn't realize she felt her own feet hit the floor that she had done until her own feet hit the floor that she had done the same. All around them the air was full of hats, and yellow roses being flung triumphantly upward. The women around Violet were screaming, crying, laughing, and dancing. The man in front of her turned around, seized Violet's and Chloe's hands, and began to dance an Irish jig. Violet freed herself from the dance and climbed onto the wide windowsill. Down on the floor of the chamber, the legislators were dancing and cheering. At least some of them were. Among the red rose wearers, only Turner and Byrne were dancing. You had to say this for them. When they changed sides, they did it with enthusiasm. From above, showers of yellow rose petals fell on the legislators as people in the gallery made confetti out of their boutonnieres. The women who had been pushing the sides of the chambers had come surging out and were leaping, singing, and tap dancing. Violet saw a woman run up to Mr. Hanover, throw her arms around him, and kiss him on the cheek. Violet laughed delightedly. Everything seemed wonderful and funny. Yes, she thought, yes. It was something to be here on this day. It was some time long after that, after the whole crowd had gone dancing and yelling down the stairs and out onto Capitol Hill together, that Violet remembered to ask Chloe, what about Mr. Martin? Shh! He's not Mr. Martin anymore. We've changed his name to Hanover in honor of our friend from Memphis. But you got him out? On bail? Not exactly, said Chloe, but we did get him out. He and Myrtle, oh my goodness, no. Chloe had her hand to her mouth and was staring up at the Capitol building. There was a man standing on a narrow stone ledge that surrounded the Capitol 3 stories above the pavement. His back and hands were pressed against the wall of the building. I hope he isn't going to jump, said Chloe. Violet noticed blonde hair and a red rose. I think it's Mr. Byrne, she said. How did he get out there? Out the window, I suppose. Oh no, he's trying to walk along the ledge. They watched helplessly as Mr. Byrne edged his way along the narrow ledge. He looked very high up. Why doesn't he get back down and crawl? Violet asked. The ledge probably isn't wide enough, said Chloe. Poor man, he must be running for his life from the Antis. They watched in anguish as Mr. Byrne worked his way gingerly along the ledge in the hot sunlight. Nobody else seemed to have noticed him. Violet was wondering whether they should call for help, and if so, what kind of help. Then a window creaked open and a woman leaned out. Violet and Chloe watched as she spoke to Mr. Byrne and then helped him inside. That's the library, said Chloe. That's got him clear of the house chamber anyway. So that's an actual story. That's an actual thing that happened. So Harry T. Byrne, he was a real life character, remember, but he had voted again, or he was someone that was an anti-suffragist, that he'd had the red rose the whole time, and then he got a letter from his mom, and then that letter from his mom persuaded him to change sides and vote for the suffragists. However, he didn't tell anyone that he was going to do that. He just read the letter from his mom and then decided to do that. So there were all of these anti-suffragists that thought that he was going to vote anti-suffragist. and then all of a sudden he changes sides, and he was afraid, and so he actually escaped out through a window. He opened up one of the windows in the hall, and then he went out onto a ledge, and then into the library, so that he could escape anti-suffragists that might have been upset with him. So, interesting little historical factoid there. They started down Capitol Hill. Myrtle and I got Theo out yesterday evening, said Chloe. I'm sorry, I didn't come to tell you last night, but I didn't want to blow your cover. Oh, I blew my own cover, said Violet, and explained how. Good for you, said Chloe. Anyway, I've been up all night with Mrs. Catt and some other women making phone calls to the two presidential candidates, Mr. Cox and Mr. Harding, and also to the White House, and to get them to call Tennessee anti-legislators and their parties. You called the White House? Said Violet, impressed. No, Mrs. Catt did that. She and Woodrow Wilson have known each other for years. The president actually wired Seth Walker and asked him to change his mind again, but Seth Walker said he couldn't go against his honest convictions. Humph. Even though they're not the same honest convictions he had a week ago. In spite of having been up all night, Chloe was much more cheerful and less tired than she had been all week. Violet knew just how she felt. The world was a brighter and more hopeful place than it had been an hour ago. I think those phone calls helped, said Violet as they wandered through the Capitol Gardens toward the street. They got Turner to change his vote. And that was all it took, Turner and Byrne, Chloe shook her head smiling, to get 27 million American women to the vote. Isn't democracy amazing? How did you get that? How did you get Mr. Hanover, Chloe corrected. Mr. Hanover out. This was confusing. Did you, bail him out? Violet wasn't sure how you got people out of jail, but she knew bail was involved somehow. Not exactly, said Chloe. He and Myrtle are both at the municipal auto camp now. Come on, we'll take a streetcar. Why, where's the hope chest, said Violet. I sold it, said Chloe, smiling. Sold it? Violet couldn't imagine Chloe selling the hope chest. Sold the hope chest? But you said the hope chest was your freedom. I was wrong, said Chloe, waving to a streetcar that was jingling toward them. Freedom is freedom. The hope chest is just a car. The streetcar stopped and they climbed on. Chloe dropped 2 nickels in the fare box. What did you sell it for? Violet asked. Well, for getting Theo out of jail, said Chloe. The hope chest belongs to a graduate student at Fisk University now. She looked happy about it. Alrighty, so they were able to bail Mr. Martin out of jail, but now his name is Mr. Hanover. And they somehow were able to sell the hope chest to get him out of jail, which might not have been the most legal thing, but they did it. So, anyway, thanks for listening.